Hi, I'm Anna McKerrow, and this is another instalment in my Magical People series. And today I'm here with Mark. Mark, can you introduce yourself, please?
I can, yes. My name's Mark Smith. I'm a chaos magician and a professional drummer and a hypnotherapist.
Fantastic. And so, Mark, can you tell me a bit about your magical practice? I mean, what's your overall beliefs, if you have any, and practices?
Um, well, I'm a chaos magician, so I'll quote Robert Anton Wilson if you like. I don't have any beliefs. I have suspicions, and that's it. So the whole model that I use is the psychological model of magic. I think it's something that you do in your head. Um, and it's around this idea of manipulating beliefs. So that's yeah,
Yeah. So,
that's it really. So we see beliefs as a tool rather than uh, we use belief as a tool rather than having beliefs. If you see what I mean, we kind of
yeah.
try and point them at a goal. Um, so yeah, that's
Okay.
that's
Can
the
you,
underlying.
for people who aren't familiar with chaos magic at all,
Hmm.
could you sort of describe it briefly? What
I can tell you what my version is.
yeah, tell us
So
your version.
well, so chaos magic is based around the idea. It's also called results magic. So it's not religious practice. It's pure occult, if you want to call it that, I suppose. Um, so it's about manipulating beliefs towards an end.
Okay.
That's it. So
Okay.
it's about the outcome, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. And the most common way of doing it is the use of sigils, which is where you turn an intent into a symbol.
Okay. And so in when you said the psychological model of magic,
Hmm.
you're so where, for instance, somebody who is on a different kind of path might think of a god as external to them and like a
Hmm.
supernatural being that they can have a relationship with. From
Yep.
your point of view, that's part of your own brain and your own being that you're communing with in a different way, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's all. I mean, even Crowley says I think it's when he's talking about the Goetia, the Key of Solomon. He says the demons of the Goetia are just aspects of our unconscious.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. Mostly because I've seen. I, I'm quite a pragmatist for an occult practitioner, and I don't like bullshit.
Mm,
So if somebody says to me I can conjure a spirit, I'm going to want to see them do it.
yeah.
And I've been practicing since I was 15, and I'm 45 next week, so a long
Hmm.
time. And I've had two, maybe three instances where I've seen things I would struggle to explain rationally, whereas the rest of it, I think is going on up here. And I find that much more interesting
Yeah.
because I'm not, it's all me. I like the responsibility that comes with it. I have to, yeah, it's all down to me. It's what I believe, it's what I want.
Mm.
And it's me getting the outcome.
And
So
do you find then it's very effective, the way that you're working with sigils, particularly? I might ask
yeah,
you to say more about sigils as well.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do it if it wasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, extremely effective. I mean, I mean, it's difficult to know where to start. I guess ask me something about sigils, and I'll kind of start from there because
Okay, Mark.
there's quite a lot to this, and I don't want to go off on
Yeah, no, no.
90 different tangents at once because I will otherwise.
No, well, that's good. I'm all for tangents.
Okay.
So I'm going to preface this by saying that I have attended some of your classes in sigil
Yep.
making specifically,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
why I wanted to interview you today because they were really, really interesting and completely pragmatic and useful.
Mm.
And I've also found using them really effective. So, first of all, perhaps just tell us what a sigil is.
Well, a sigil is where you take a statement of intent, so something that you want, you write it down, you remove the vowels and the duplicate letters, and you turn it into an image. So
Hmm.
the idea fundamentally is that your conscious brain doubts things, your unconscious brain doesn't doubt things, and the image bypasses the doubting mechanism.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to think about it. The trick with sigils is getting the statement right in the first place. So
Mm.
I think um, you probably noticed this, that I'm a big stickler for knowing what you want. And that, to me, is the crux of chaos magic. I mean, it's the crux of being a magician. Is the difference. Magicians can tell the difference between what's really happening and what they think is happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder to do than you think, because your brain is constantly, I want to say, it's making things up, but it's making things up for a good reason. So it's making things up because it needs to get a cogent picture of what's happening as fast as possible. In order to be an effective magician, to enact your will on the universe, if you like, you have to be able to tell the difference between the safety mechanisms it's enacting to stop you doing things and what you actually want.
Uh-huh.
And that's much harder than it looks. It's also much more long-winded than it looks, and boring. And people, and this is where, again, magic is much more mundane than most people. To be good at it, it requires a lot of work, and like the sigils and the ritual, to me, are the icing, they're the detail.
Yeah.
Because very often, once you uncover, and notice I'm not saying true will, because I don't believe you have true will. I think your true will changes every 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You're a fluid entity. Everything about you changes on, depending on who you're with, what you're doing. I'm not talking to you now the same that I would talk to somebody else. It's just, my neural pathways are reorganizing themselves into what they think I need to present at the moment. So recognizing that that's going on, and then kind of trying to see fundamentally what you're actually after, that's the key to doing it. And I found most of the time, it's why I did were you on the course where I give you the protocol, the questions?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, right. So they are the ritual. Everything else is detail. You get the questions down, you usually get what you want at the end of it.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound completely contradictory, but I think magic is something that's completely unnecessary most of the time.
No, I was about to say that. And actually, so when you have said, you've identified your goal, whatever that might be, and usually when you sit down and work out all the sort of rational, normal ways you could go about getting it, it's quite likely you could get it anyway, because a new job, or it's, you can update your CV and doing all the sort of the real world stuff, if you like, which, as you say, is quite boring in a way, because the whole point of being into magic, one would think, is that so you can do more sparkly woo things.
Well, it depends, you see, because that's perfectly reasonable as well. It's just that it's this, what do I want? So I had a lady on one of my courses she said she wanted to astrally project. So people see these questions and they think that I'm like, okay, well, this has to be something material. It doesn't at all. What I want, so my first question is, how are you going to know you've astrally projected? Versus feeling like you've astrally projected.
Sure.
Because they're not the same thing. Any feeling you have can be simulated. Right? So if I inject you with a needle full of adrenaline, you will have a panic attack, for example. So I can induce, is that panic attack real? Should it be taken notice of? So you've got to take all these things into account. And it turned out that what she wanted was the experience. Now that's fine, but there's a difference between the real thing, in inverted commas, and feeling like you've done the real thing. And the question is, which one do you want? Both are perfectly fine, because there's no kind of, I think it's one of the things that people find very difficult to let go of when they do this kind of practice is this is all down to what you want. There is no right or wrong. I don't care what you do. It doesn't make any difference to me. I get questions about, can you manipulate other people with sigils? I mean, it's a loaded question in the first place. What do you mean by manipulate? And again, it's the other reason I like it, is because it's you have to be good at it. You can't lie to yourself. It just doesn't work, because the system will sabotage you. That's what it does. And it's where it's the same thing with a musical instrument. So to kind of tie these things in, if you come for a lesson and you haven't practiced, I can see straight away.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you say. Oh, I've done that. Oh, this. You can either do it or you can't. And I like that, because I think one of the biggest difficulties with the occult is there's a lot of fluff.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I would agree for sure. on the other hand, one could say that for some people, the fluff, which you could say, like, complicated rituals and lots of stuff and crystals and candles and all the stuff that you might need, does set a useful psychological staging for something.
Yeah, sorry,
Part of
just to
that kind of,
interject.
yeah.
That's not what I mean. But that's not what I mean by the fluff.
Oh, right. Sorry. What do you mean by the fluff?
No, so I don't mean the. There's a lot of too much theory, not enough practice.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so there's nothing. I'm not against long, elaborate rituals and whatever you need to make it work. The question is, why are you doing it? It's the only thing I'm interested in.
Okay.
What's the outcome? So you can explain to me the ins and outs of the banishing ritual of the Pentagram. Have you done it? Did it work? There, the end. That's that. And well, because otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of theoretical. There's two types of people I meet in this world. There's the theoreticians and there's the practitioners. And the theoreticians have read a lot of books, but had very few, and they're still stuck on the same things.
Mm-hmm.
I'll sum it up in a single quote. You don't get it till you can do it. And you can tell the people who've done it fairly quickly. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. It hadn't occurred to me that might be the case, because I kind of naturally assume people are doing things as well as sort of maybe perhaps learning about new approaches and then trying them out and things.
I'll tell you this is just based on my experience. And this isn't just in the occult world, this is generally. And I'll give you a story to kind of explain it. I would say 9 out of 10 people don't do it properly. So out of the classes that I do, well, it depends, because when by the time you get to sort of the effective spell or something, my longer classes, people tend to engage in that quite well, actually. But in generally, most of the time, it's why I have that question, what's stopping you? Because it works, you got to do it, but something just...
Yeah.
And a lot of people, because then you're never told how to get past it. That's the thing. So I did some internet marketing training a few years ago, and it was very expensive. It was very good, and it was about selling things on Facebook. Now, I could go on for hours about how to pick the right people for that kind of thing, because there's a lot of bullshit out there with that kind of thing. So and I did the course and it worked, and I went to they had like a conference thing at the end of it.
Yeah.
And there was about 50 people there, and the woman running it said, right, and so there were 4 stages to this program, and I'd done all of them at this point. She said, she was talking about second section of stage 2. How many people in the class do you think had done that as a percentage?
I'm going to say, because of the way that you're telling the story, I feel like it's not very many.
3 people.
Okay, out of 50, you said.
Out of 50, very, very low. And so sometimes you get, and this is one of the problems. So I'm going to go on a tangent, so pull me back if I go too far.
Go on the tangent.
It's generally a problem with music as well, and the internet. You get information paralysis. Too much stuff, right? So with drumming, I did an interview with a drumming channel the other day, and we were talking about there's too much what, not enough why. Right? So you don't need me to teach you how to do magic. There's so much stuff on there on what to do. The question is why you're not doing it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I come in with it, is what's stopped, because it all works. It's all basically the same. My system works just as well as yours or somebody else. It's all because it's hitting the same things. So the question is, why aren't you doing it? And most of the time it's information paralysis, and that transforms into this kind of thing where you're acquiring knowledge. And it's actually a defense mechanism to stop you failing.
Yeah.
That's what it's doing. It's like, if I learn more, I won't get it wrong.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there, isn't there? Partly a lack of confidence, as you say. There's a lot. Also, I think you get. I mean, if you attend a class or read a book and you enjoy it and everything, there is a sort of a reward for your ego in having done that. Like, oh, well done, you went to a class and you did
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Oh, it's
yeah,
good.
yeah,
And that does feel nice and good. And it does feel
mm,
nice to know more. Personally speaking, when, for instance, when I've been doing sigils and in some case not doing them and then thinking, why haven't I done the thing for the
yeah,
thing that I want? And then have pushed myself to do it. And then as soon as I've done it, I've thought, well, why didn't I do that a
mm,
month ago? And it's only because I think there's a fear attached to getting the thing that you have said that you want,
yeah,
because you do want that thing, but there might be some difficult consequences associated with getting that thing, and that's what oh God, that would mean I would have to do something slightly uncomfortable, like talk to people on the internet and then put it on
yeah,
YouTube, and it would be
yeah,
embarrassing, for
yeah.
instance. Now I'm doing it. It's obviously really enjoyable, and I don't know why I didn't do it before, but there you are. That's
Well, so let's look at that for a second. Um, and understanding the fact that you've noticed it, that's the first. That's the first thing. See, now I don't think anything that I'm teaching people is anything new. It's just that you need it repeated at you a lot more than you think you do, me included, right? So everything you've just described, I do all the time.
mm,
So I don't think I've solved any of this. The difference is I know I'm doing it,
yeah.
and
I
then I
think
can do something about it.
it is that. I don't know if you're aware. I really like this woman in America called um, Carolyn Elliott. I don't know if you're aware of her. I think you would probably quite like her approach. She's a very practical
Mm,
magician in a slightly different way, and
mm,
she has kind of a different way around things. And she does a lot of kind of work around shadow work and integrating shadows and things. But she says having is evidence of wanting, and that has become one of my maximum maxims for life. Basically, so if you have it in your life, it's because you want it, even
yeah,
though you might not think you want it.
yeah,
Um, and it's so true. And I think,
yeah,
and then that, but it's really super useful because then you can look at what you do have
mm,
and then go, but you have this. So do you really want to change that? And then you go in. So you taught us about can you say a little bit about the, if you like, unconscious or the back end brain and the front end brain, if you
yeah,
like, and how,
yeah.
which one is in charge?
So I use the mammoth and the rider as an allegory for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the 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 conscious, what is generally thought of as the conscious, or what you perceive to be you, is a little rider guy on the top of this gigantic mammoth. So I'll start with the mammoth. The mammoth is what we would call the unconscious. So Daniel Kahneman refers to it as System One, the fast thinker. So he wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow,
Yeah, I've been reading that.
which
It's good.
is very interesting. The
Mm.
experiments, have you been doing the experiments as you go along, where it gives you the little tests on the page?
Yeah, I've done like two and I've skipped
Yeah,
over one. And then
yeah,
at the end, he goes, if you skipped over it,
yeah, yeah.
this is
Now the best
useless.
thing about yeah, where it tells you what you're going to do before you do it,
Yeah,
which tells you that you're a systemic entity and you're predictable to some degree,
yeah.
which is really useful if you're a magician, because it means you can do it again. That's so anyway. So the reason I came up with the mammoth and the rider is because the standard way people, or the image people associate with the unconscious and the conscious, is the iceberg. So you've got the peak
Mm-hmm.
above the water, right? Which has led to two things. First off, the iceberg is static, doesn't do anything, whereas your unconscious is very much active all the time. And secondly, it's led to that ridiculous Hollywood idea that you don't use 90% of your brain,
Mm-hmm.
which is just rubbish. You'd fall over dead if you didn't. It's being used all of the time. It's just you cannot consciously access it.
Right.
Um, so the mammoth is old. It's well evolved. It's extremely powerful. It's very much running the show. Um, it has already decided what you want, and it decides within the first 6 years of your life based on early exposure.
Oh,
Right.
okay. I haven't got
So
that.
this is my. Um, I'll go into it in a minute if you're interested. I'm talking to somebody after this actually about a possible PhD study on this kind of thing. So,
Mm.
um, but so, the thing to understand about the mammoth is it is completely reactive. it has no sense of linear time.
Mm.
So it doesn't understand yesterday, tomorrow. It only knows right now. It is mathematically illiterate, so it can't calculate odds. It's binary. It works on threat or no threat.
Mm-hmm.
It either sees that something is dangerous or it's not, and it acts accordingly. It doesn't differentiate between danger. It just increases intensity. That's it. So this leads into sort of, and it talks to you through sensation and metaphor. So it produces feelings in your body to tell you what your state is.
Mm-hmm.
The feelings it produces are the prime motivator for everything you do. So you move towards things that make you feel good, and you generally move away from things that make you feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
With a caveat: if you repeat something enough, it will normalize something that's bad because it thinks it will give you a good outcome. Right, which is why, because so the no sense of linear time is the reason you'll do things in the short term that are incredibly destructive in the long term.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
because it just doesn't think like that. So it's why the reason I came up with it originally about 10 years ago was I wanted to be able to explain to somebody who had no experience of it why an alcoholic can't just put the drink down.
Right.
And the short version is the mammoth has internalized the idea that the alcohol temporarily takes away the feeling that tells it it's in danger.
Yeah.
The danger feeling means it's going to die. So in a very real sense, the mammoth thinks if you stop doing this, you're going to die.
Right. Yeah. That makes total sense, doesn't it?
So, and the rider does have a sense of linear time. It has creative imagination and it's proactive. So it can problem solve at distance and it can infer information. So that's the other thing with the mammoth is it's literal. It's a really interesting thing that happens in hypnosis is a thing called trance logic. So if I say, can I have your name when you're in trance, a lot of people just say yes.
Right.
Because the inference is they don't infer to like, what do you mean by this? It just answers the question.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the rider is capable of inference. It has creative imagination, so it's a gift, and I'm not going to say a curse because it's not a curse. It's a gift and an issue sometimes, right? So
yeah.
It's why very creative people are prone to depression. They're good at thinking of bad shit.
Okay, that's really good way of putting it, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking it's because if you had a less good imagination, you would be much better off sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. There's a lot to be said for that, and I don't mean that in a harsh way. If you are, now I must caveat this with that is my experience, right? So I'm not saying there's hard scientific evidence.
Yeah, I mean, we're here talking about your worldview, if you like. So
no, sure, but I think it's important that people understand I'm not, all creative people aren't automatically depressed. But there is a certain, and I think that's working as a therapist over a long period of time. Creative types are very good at coming up with everything that's going to go wrong. So you have this, if you understand that the mammoth's job is to look out for danger, that's what it does. It signals a threat and then the rider goes, oh, what could it be? That's what worrying is, so it jumps forwards. So it has a sense of linear time and it can play the odds. So the rider can calculate the percentage chances of something happening and understand it in a meaningful way. The mammoth has no idea, right? Yeah. This is why you get the gambler's fallacy. It feels like it's my turn to win, right? The problem with the rider is to engage the rider is expensive. To and I mean like in glucose and sodium, it costs a lot of physical energy to think. Yeah. Which is why we just don't do it most of the time. It is very hard work and it's expensive, and it's not going to kill you if you don't.
Right.
And so being a magician in a very real sense is energetically expensive.
Yeah. Right. That was a really interesting tangent. And so in Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a book I'd recommend people to read watching this, that's what they're talking about. In many situations, sort of when tested, people will, even in the face of information that logically seems otherwise, will often fall back on instinct in terms of, I might win, but you won't. You know, there's something, but you'll remember better. There's one where he goes into, somewhere where I guess it's in Vegas or but a casino where people are gambling, and
Mm-hmm.
goes up to people and says, "I'll give you $10 or something now. You can have it now, or you can go and gamble." And most people don't take the $10 or however much it is, even though it's a much better deal to take that, because it's much more, they can walk away with something, you know, definite instead of something more, which is really, yeah.
It's do you remember the term for it? It's the affect heuristic. It's what it feels like versus what it is.
Yeah.
So that, to me, in a nutshell, is a description of a magician. The magician realizes that what they think is real isn't, and works to change it.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's so hugely fascinating when you start to kind of go beyond into all of this, what your brain is actually wanting and doing, because it gives you a different perspective on the, for instance, kind of conscious programming that is things like positive intentions and what's the other word, the other thing you can call that? But you know, when you
Affirmations.
thank
Yep.
you. You know, when you say positive things to yourself, obviously there's no bad thing in doing those things, but it does make you wonder, is that doing any work changing the back end of the brain, or is it not? And presumably it's not, you know.
So the short answer, here's a way of thinking about it. Belief is idea plus emotion. The affirmation is the idea.
Yeah.
If the mammoth goes, no, it doesn't do anything. So you have, and the way the sensation produced along. So if you say an affirmation and it makes you feel stressed, nothing will happen. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because the details. It's simple, but it's got lots of bits. But fundamentally, you can tell whether you believe something by how it makes you feel.
Right.
So if you say every day in every way I'm getting better and better, and you sort of feel kind of, it's not going to take. And there's a lot to be said for dogged repetition, but not in this case.
Yeah.
So if you keep saying it, it just bounces. It's in hypnosis you get it. It's what they call trance resistance. So you're fighting basically. So that bit of your brain just won't take it, and you can't force the mammoth. Remember, it doesn't understand words. That's the other thing. So you can say an affirmation until you're blue in the face. It's just sitting there going, unless there's an association with those words that you take on as making you feel calm, it won't do anything, because it just sits there going, why are you saying these things to me? It's like talking to a cat. You know, it'll look at you interested and then go and do what it wants to do.
Yeah.
So the way I think of it is you have to persuade the mammoth. This is what I talked about. And so sigil magic is a way of persuading the mammoth that what you want it to do is a good idea. And sigils to me are nudges. So magic isn't designed to produce, or very rarely produces, profound change. Sometimes it does, but often it just does that, just enough to you're lining the dominoes up for yourself. And occasionally it does. Occasionally you'll get the boom.
Yeah.
Happen.
But maybe when that happens, it's because whatever you have enacted is very conversant with what was in the back anyway, sort of thing.
Yeah, generally, I think so.
It's so interesting. So from it's quite a small. Well, there's another slight tangent. So I've got a lot of background in healing work in a variety of different ways. So, but Reiki particularly, but there's a healing technique called breath work, which is a really interesting thing, and it's kind of a breathing. If you don't know if you know about it, but it's a breathing technique which puts you into a slightly trancey state.
Okay.
And it makes it easier for you to sort of process trauma, particularly. It makes you quite emotional, and it basically just comes out really good. It's quite transformational because it gives you the opportunity to process things that you are not dealing with, really. And I found, since doing things like that, which is, I suppose you could say, a way of talking more directly with the mammoth, if you like, because it's all feeling, it's all emotion and stuff. You are then able to kind of, you don't forget stuff, but you kind of able to move on from things, and therefore it actually makes your I'm saying your, in my experience, it makes my sort of manifestation abilities a lot easier. And I've thought about it a lot in this context, in that it's that very emotional way to really directly access stuff that's back there that you wouldn't normally get to. Just, I give that to you as a thought.
Well, that, the way I would explain that is what you're doing is you're distracting the rider. You're getting him out the way.
Yeah,
So that's what meditation is. Look at this. All right then. And there's this idea that sort of, now I don't really know why. I think it's probably the way we're taught in school, but I don't know that for sure. And also people are prone to their own delusions as well. This idea that we really do think that the rational brain's in charge, and it isn't. So this idea that emotion is something, or that the sensations attached to things are something separate to the thing. Right? I'll give you a thought experiment. If you can remember something that you were worrying about recently, it could be a minor thing, right? So when you think about it, it will produce a sensation in your body.
Yeah.
So if I could reach in and take the sensation away, are you still worrying?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the sensation very much is the worry.
Yeah, I think it becomes that, doesn't it?
Well, it is that. If it's not there, what are you doing?
You're not. You're just getting on with the thing that you have to do.
Well, you're thinking versus worrying. So worrying is thinking versus and stress. So if I take the stress away, what are you doing? You're just thinking.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing when you're processing, as you're talking about there, is just allowing the system to do its job. Right? And so this is where people come unstuck, because there's all kinds of connotations with this idea of, and so, sorry, I've had 15 thoughts come into my head at once. So I'm going to line them up and go with them. The biggest difficulty people have when dealing with long-term anxiety, for example, is that they don't want it. So when you don't want something, you try and get rid of it. And every time so the rider thinks, right, how can I stop this bastard making all this noise? And it comes up with various things, from mundane things like looking at Facebook for 3 hours in a row to drinking yourself unconscious, and everything in between that you could possibly think about. The way you process the anxiety is to simply let it happen. And that's why and I think it's the biggest misunderstanding about, and as you've noticed, as soon as you get all that shit out of the way, things start to happen.
Yeah, you just feel so much better, lighter. It's not that you don't know those traumatic things have happened to you or whatever. It's just that you're not, well, from my point of view, I suppose you're not using all your energy suppressing it that whole time, and you've sat with it, or you've cried it out, or you've done whatever you need to do with it, and there you are.
So to me, magic is a thing that happens anyway. You're just in the way of it.
Yeah, you're getting in your own way, basically.
Yeah, and so this is so you can probably see why I tended towards chaos magic especially as a therapist, because it's all the same thing. I've just generally found over and over again, if you get past that, what's stopping me? And it's usually something. And the problem is with this, and it goes back to this: you don't get it till you can do it, right? I can say, well, you're not doing it because you're afraid. That's not going to change a thing.
No.
Until you've actually experienced and processed what's happening. So, and Kahneman says in the book at some point, I think, you can't teach psychology, you can only experience it. And I think it's the same thing. I'm going to say chaos magic, but I'm going to stick my neck out and say every occult practice on earth. You cannot teach it, you can only experience it.
No, I agree with that.
Teach you the mechanics, but you've got to do it.
Yeah.
And once you've had that experience of what it's like, you can do it again. So yeah, there you go. That explains my earlier thing quite neatly. That's what I mean. It's experiential, and I think particularly. So if you bear with me a second, I'll go off on another tangent. So I teach a lot of kids in schools. I teach music. One of the most difficult things I have to do especially with a new student, is get them out of the idea that they can't get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
playing the drums particularly, you spend a lot of time making huge mistakes, and they get what I call the maths class syndrome. You probably remember this from when you were back at school. You're sitting in class and the teacher goes, "What's the answer to this?" And you've got no idea. I don't know. Were you good at maths?
No.
No, I usually pick on maths because people are either amazing at it or they hated it. And you sort of do this. You kind of you try and look like you're thinking, right? In the hope that they'll just leave you alone and go somewhere else. What they really should do is say, if you don't know, say so. And it takes months for me to get them to be able to do that. Because if you know the answer to a question, it comes in like that. Your brain works at light speed. I mean, if you know it, it's there. If you don't know it, you just need to be told it again. And what they're trying to do there is actually, like, if they could get up and run, they would.
Yeah.
And it causes all kinds of problems down the line. I won't get into the sort of the problems with the way a lot of things are taught, but learning to screw things up, get up and do them again. If you can get that under your belt, you won't have any problems with anything, because most things are just, there's a lot to be said for dogged determination. Just do it again. JFDI, remember that? Just fucking do it.
Yeah, just working that out in my brain.
Just fucking do it.
I do.
Second thing I say to everybody, just do it a lot.
Yeah. You know? Well, I'm the same. I mean, like, as a writer, the only difference really between what you might think of as a successful writer or as a and God, there's loads of definitions for either one of those, but it's just doing it over a long period of time. Like, nobody wakes up in the morning at age 20 or 15 or whatever and as an amazing writer. Well, maybe somebody does, the shits, but like it's unlikely. Most people just labor through hundreds of thousands of hours of writing, and eventually you just get better. It's just how it works, and you get, if you're allowed to write more books, you get more successful. But it's the same. The confidence thing, though, because you have to have confidence to practice and keep going.
Yes, yeah. Have you ever had a first draft that you liked?
I am abnormally confident in my own work to a stupid degree. I always like it, but it can always be better. Yeah, right, there's always things I like in it, but there's always things you think, oh, that's shit. That's what was I thinking? Yeah. Or, so that's
I think they're the value. It's a hard thing to get used to, is the idea that the stuff that you take out is as useful as the stuff you leave in.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what shapes it.
It's you're very emotionally attached to it. You don't want to, I love that bit. It's not very good. Yeah, exactly.
There's a saying in drumming that comes up quite a lot. Doesn't matter how good you are, there's a 5-year-old Asian kid somewhere who does it better. And all you need to do is spend time on YouTube looking at these Chinese prodigies who are 6 and can play God knows what on the drum set. But you can't do anything about that. You just got to keep going. So.
Yeah, I know, and it doesn't affect you personally either. But that's an ego thing, isn't it? Like, I must be the best. Well, you don't have to be the best. You just have to be good enough. But and other uninspirational things from me. Wow, that was brilliant. That was very interesting. We went on some really interesting tangents there. I'm trying to think if there's anything I was going to ask you that we haven't basically covered anyway. So you have talked. You are, as well as a chaos magician, you teach drums and you're a hypnotherapist as well. But we've talked a lot about how those things all interact within your life, because it's all connected, basically, isn't it, for you?
So I can tell you how that came about, if you like. So I've worked with various coaches over the years, business coaches and whatever, and I came across a guy called Andrew Horder a few years ago, and worked with him for about 3 years, and he's a very rare combination of a business coach who knows how to work with, let's gently call them artistic people who don't know how to make money to start with, right? But also he's very into a thing called core process. So digging down into what your thing is. And I did a workshop with him, and it's said a lot about these things that they're transformational, but it really was. So the whole point of it was that you get down to what he calls your genius. What is it that draws a thread along everything you do? And you have to come out with a statement at the end of it. And mine is mastery through simplicity.
Can you say that
So
again?
my mastery through simplicity.
Okay, perfect.
So my skill across everything I do is making you feel that it's easy to do. That's it. And so when I'm working as a therapist, doing cognitive behavioral therapy, teaching music, chaos magic, all of that stuff, you probably noticed I'm trying to bring it back down to the really simple things that work all the time. And that's the thread. And one of the interesting things that we did in that workshop was you have to write down what you think you bring to the table. And then you have to bring in 4 or 5 testimonials from people you've worked with. And you line them up against each other and draw lines.
Right.
Now, you want to talk about belief shifts happening. That was like, oh, Christ, okay.
Okay.
The first one that came was, I might be all right at this.
Yeah.
Which was a weird one. I might know what I'm doing here. So it helps with imposter syndrome. But again, it comes right back to this idea of why? What are you doing it for? You work that out, and I generally think the rest of it takes care of itself. And to that extent, the occult is kind of a reflection. How you approach the occult is a reflection of how you approach everything else. You know, and that's not to kind of dispel the idea that I'm purely kind of, you must do this for things. If you want, the experience of communing with the god and the goddess, that's fine. Just make sure that you're going to get what you want out of it, and it'll be 100 times better. And that's
total sense. Yeah. And there's no reason why you can't take a more logical and organized approach to what you might think of as quite, I don't think of it as this, but some people might think it's a very airy fairy thing. It doesn't have to be airy fairy. It's not that at all. It's kind of actually the nature of being.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say on that score, I've participated in some rituals for the hell of doing it, just because I enjoy it, and that's perfectly fine. I go to my wife's second degree witch, I think. I don't
in a Wicca.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so and I've been to a lot of open rituals with her.
Yeah,
I'm not Wiccan. I don't particularly use the system, but it's fun.
Sure.
And I go with the intention of this is going to be good fun, and then I get something out of it. Very occasionally, I'll take sigils in my pocket to charge them, but that's that's neither here nor there. But I think people forget that it's like you're supposed to enjoy this.
Well, you'd wonder why you were doing it otherwise. Really, I think it's because it's quite an alternative kind of thing to do. I feel like if you're not enjoying it, there's a lot of other things you could be doing for less effort. Yeah, presumably, like being at the pub.
Well, you could do that. You could do both.
You could do that afterwards.
Wiccans are quite good at doing it at the pub as well.
That's
true. Which is great, I think it's and I think that's a perfectly valid reason. It's none of it's, if you want to do, I don't know, sound baths or something, just do it. Don't. But again, to me, from my point of view as a magician, it's just knowing why.
Thank you. That's been so interesting. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you for your time, Mark.
That's okay. Could I just mention that I've got a book coming out?
Please do.
Would that be all right?
No, you can't mention that.
Oh, thanks. No. Okay. It's about my sigil. I've written my sigil magic course into a book.
Oh, fantastic.
And there's a little bit of a story behind it. So a lady from Pelagia Publishing, they're like a small Dutch company, Edith Hagenaar, her name is. She attended one of my workshops in 2019 and walked up to me afterwards as we were in the pub and said, "Have you considered writing this as a book?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I haven't got a publisher." Handed me a card, so I signed to that, and it was supposed to be out last March. Right. We all know what happened last March. Completely. It was supposed to be launched at the Mind Body Spirit show, which didn't. Yeah, which didn't happen. So, but I think the plan is April this year.
Oh, good. Okay. And
So
what's it called?
well, we don't have a title. A working title as the effective spell at the moment, but I don't know whether that'll be the thing. But it's got two sort of broad sections. The first section is on how to tell the difference between what you think you want and what you really want, and then I've got step-by-step guides for how I make sigils. So I've got the letter sigils, number sigils, planetary sigils.
Brilliant.
Lots of different ideas for things. So
yeah.
There you go.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, do you know what? When it comes out, you can send me a link and I can put it underneath the video here.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
In a few months. That'd be great. Fantastic. I will look forward to that. It's been so nice talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay. Bye.